Iowa's News Now Sports has your all-access pass to all things Hawkeyes. This is Eye on the Hawks.
Welcome to this pre-Troy edition of Eye on the Hawks. Mitch Fick, Owen Sebring, Mike Howell here. Thanks to everybody who's always tuning in on the YouTube channel. It's 1 o'clock on a Wednesday as we stream here live. You can get all of our episodes there on the Iowa's News Now YouTube channel or download the audio-only version wherever you listen to podcasts. But again, this YouTube channel has all the videos that we're going to be showing, all the interviews, things like that, and we get some reels up there as well, just some online kind of YouTube exclusive content. So be sure to subscribe to that if you haven't already. We are 96 hours or so, a little less removed from the Cy-Hawk loss to Iowa State. The 24-hour rule is here and gone for the Iowa Hawkeyes. They have flushed the loss, they told us on Tuesday, and are moving on to their focus to Troy. Here are the players on Tuesday after moving ahead with a couple of practices heading into their final non-conference game of 2024.
Everybody's, feeling the same way. And just collectively, we've been taking the same approach to it. Coach Ferentz and all the coaches have harped on us with just like the 24-hour rule and just moving on from it. And obviously it was a tough loss, but I feel like collectively as a team, we've taken it with a grain, or not with a grain of salt, but taken it and moved on from it. So.
No, yeah, we're totally focused on Troy right now, and like we saw last week, like Notre Dame got upset. Like best things happen. This is a serious opponent, and we were focused on that completely. Of course, we learned from last week and watched the film. We had that 24-hour rule, and now we're moving on. And we had a good practice today, so we're excited about Troy.
I think it just falls to the offensive line, and we got to be able to run the ball in those situations. I feel like we didn't execute as good as we could later in that game, but we can't stay on it for all this week. We got to move on. We got a good opponent in Troy coming up. So,
personally, once the game is over, I take that time in the locker room to I sit in the locker room for a little bit, either it's win or loss. Just hang out with the team, see what the mood is, kind of bounce off other guys, and then I take an extra 30 minutes for myself to kind of just think about the plays that didn't go our way or the plays that maybe did go our way. And then, after that, I pretty much just move on already. There's a lot of football left in the season. So as a group, we just have to move on quick. And I think with a lot of leadership guys with a lot of, years under their belt, we've done good of moving on. So
I can even top you on that.
A lot of veteran guys there. Certainly you heard from Jacob Gill, Hayden Large, Connor Colby, Kyler Fisher. A lot of people thinking that was maybe Kyler's best game as a Hawkeye. At least felt like he was the most active all around. I asked him about Rude not getting the chance of maybe a couple interception opportunities, a fumble that was on the ground that he said he had a shot at. But I almost feel bad as a media member rolling in on a Tuesday, almost 48 hours after they're removed from their 24-hour period. And nobody's really asking about Troy, right? We're all wondering, are you guys okay? I mean, you almost feel like you're just digging in. Boy, what a loss, right? What a tough loss. But
you need a hug.
But what was your feeling of how they're doing? And we're never going to get too fruitful answers anytime we ask about anything really with a Hawkeye football player. They keep things pretty close to the vest. But what did you think about the mood on Tuesday, talking to players and Coach Ferentz, and just the attitude heading into a non-con game that probably the fan base already kind of looks past because you got to go get Floyd next weekend?
You could definitely tell that it felt like the air had come out of the room just a little bit less energy than we'd had after the win against Illinois State in Week 1. Little less fun, little less joking around. They were out there, answering questions just like business as usual. But after we got through with everything, I was like, we didn't get a lot of real interesting stories or a lot of interesting sound bites out of the day. There was some good stuff talking about Cade Johnson, how well he's doing, talking about, just how you respond after a loss like this. But yeah, that's what I feel like most of the questions were. It wasn't about what's Troy's defense look like, what's Troy's offense, what are their weapons. It was a lot about how do you come back from a loss like that. And I don't know if that's, we'll never truly know what's inside the minds of these players, but it seems like that was the questions that we were posing a lot just because, we kind of take Troy for granted. It feels so similar to the Minnesota game last year, where they had just that gut punch loss to them, and then they had to go on a bye week the following week, and then wait until the next week to have their
deal with the Brian Ferentz fallout and everything like that.
Yes, it's exactly right.
Not that Troy's a bye week, but it kind of feels like that when you're sitting in our seat, because they're 0-2, they got beat by Nevada and a team that Iowa beat 30-0 or 27-0 like 2 years ago. Like, it shouldn't be that much of a contest if Iowa comes out and plays to its potential. So it is kind of tough from a media's perspective to, like, there are no storylines, in my opinion, that are interesting on Saturday.
Mm-hmm. There's some tie-ins we'll get to in a little bit. We'll show a little respect to Troy football. But yeah, it's the first game of the season is Illinois State, but it's the season opener, and there's all this hope. You've got so many guys back. Is the offense going to take a step with Tim Lester? So you've got so much to talk about. Iowa State speaks for itself. It's a rivalry game. Then you get to Troy. I think win or lose, win, you're 2-0, you're feeling good about things. The loss, though, and the fashion in which they run for 200 yards. Iowa State goes 2 of 14, I think it was, on third down. Iowa had an 8-point lead. Remember that 8-point lead stat? I think they're now like 78-3 in the last decade when they lead by 8. Like, it was just a shocking loss. But so you've got that maybe lingering a little bit, but also just with Minnesota next week too, and trying to get Floyd back and the start of Big Ten play and everything still to play there for in the conference. Troy week just kind of feels like this purgatory of like, well, what is there to talk about? You know, it's a team, it's from the Sun Belt. I don't think they've played a Sun Belt team since Jordan Canzeri was a freshman when they played Louisiana Monroe. I remember that vividly because that was the biggest talking point coming out of Louisiana Monroe in 2011 was that freshman that played in the fourth quarter and had like 8 carries for 57 yards. Boy, he looks really good. And Jordan Canzeri turned out to be pretty darn good. But it's the final game of the non-con. You're coming off this kind of historic loss that Iowa just doesn't lose, and we'll get into the parallels of a game from 20 years prior too, but it just feels like that game that everyone's like, yeah, let's just get through it. Let's just get to Minnesota. Certainly that's maybe on the fan base side and the media side of just like, we're not going to look too much into Troy because why else would we need to, aside from the fact that there were rumors that maybe Tim Lester was going to end up at Troy, and he's got a tie to Troy's head coach.
That storyline.
But other than that, it's like, I think people are just trying to flush Iowa State somehow, but also peeking ahead to next Saturday night up in Minneapolis.
It's especially from our side, too, because I felt like I kept saying that, after the Iowa State game, that's when we're really going to know this Hawkeye team. We're going to know what they're about. And Saturday did not prove that. It's like, okay, who is Iowa about? Are they the first half team or are they the second half team that blew a 13-point lead? And again, this Saturday, we're still not going to get a good feel. Unless Iowa loses to Troy, then we're going to get a feel for who this Iowa team is. But assuming they win by 20-plus, it's like we still are going to have to wait till that Minnesota game to get a good sense for what this Iowa team is.
There's no win that I think the fan base is going to feel spectacular about on Saturday.
If they do an offensive explosion again,
if they lose, it's awful. But yeah, if it's 40-0 part 2, it's Troy. Good for you guys.
Do it against Minnesota.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to prove it. So it's a week where you can only lose traction, right? Which you could probably say about most like non-con wrapping games. Western Michigan was probably the same way last year as well.
Yeah.
Do you remember too the other Sun Belt team we played? This is our third Sun Belt game.
Yeah, Louisiana Monroe in 2011.
2009, they played Arkansas State.
Arkansas State. Demario Davis had a pick 6 against Ricky Stanzi that I then interviewed him for some Super Bowl promotion thing like 10 years later, and he vividly remembered he remembered juking Stanzi on his way to the end zone, and he did a front flip and got flagged for it. But yeah, Arkansas State.
So I only bring that up.
Red Wolves.
I only bring that game up because that year Iowa went 11-2. That was the third game after Iowa State, and they only won 24-21. It was in hand. It was 24-14. They scored a late touchdown with 2 minutes left. Then they tried an onside kick. I don't think they got it. So, it never was in doubt. But it's one of those games where afterwards we were thinking, man, is this team not good?
Boy, that's an Iowa non-con win if there ever was one, right? Never in doubt, but closer than you'd maybe expect.
And it reminds me, just looking at this, Iowa Hawkeye Football Notes posted about it this morning, about the 2 Sun Belt games. It's like the team you see in September, and it's hard to focus on that coming off a loss, is rarely ever the team that plays in October and November, especially at this program. So Iowa can get better, and I expect that they do, the offense especially. It still hurts a lot to lose to your arch rival and lose a trophy and stuff like that and get a loss so early on the schedule. But, this team can grow.
Yeah, and I think the internet era, especially when you've got a week between games, as you always have, but there are just so many chances to get your wheels spinning and people, building up momentum on things that maybe don't really matter and are part of the conversation in the immediate post game, but then you get to Tuesday and Wednesday and you're like, boy, can we speed this game up and get to it? Because you just have people get so frantic and anxious maybe about what is happening, what's not happening, why isn't this not, or why is this happening, why is it not happening? And so I think the internet area and college football getting as big as it is, boy, those 6 days in between games, people just are looking for something to talk about and going through every chaos theory and conspiracy theory of what should be happening or can happen or isn't happening and why is it not happening. And boy, it's sure fun for us in the media, right?
Do you guys think that the players are going to be extra motivated for this game because they're coming off a loss? I mean, they took it hard with those interviews with Jay and Sebastian last week.
Though I think so. I don't. I think the defense especially, right? Because you have been the stalwart for the last half decade, really, in a lot of ways of this program, and you have been the reliable and the steady strength while the offense has struggled, and giving up 4 explosive plays through the air in one half, again, just ties into a loss that is kind of inexplicable because there was a lead, because Iowa does not lose games that they lead by 8 points or more, because they rush for 200 yards. And Scott Docterman a few years ago, and I think we talked about it last year, had that stat about when Iowa rushes for 100 yards, they have like a 900 win percentage. It's just there were so many things that worked out for Iowa, and they still lose by 1, because it comes down to whether you want to look at goal line execution or an interception or giving up those big plays. It's just, I think people are just kind of going through stages of grief almost, of just how did you lose this game where you did so many things pretty darn well and then time got away from you.
Did you guys, and I think it was in the second half, so maybe you were on the road back to the station, did you see the fumble Kyler was talking about? Because they got a good shot of it. Jay punched it out. It just sat there, and they're like 5 feet from the sideline. And Kyler just accidentally kicked it with his shin, and totally not his fault. But
those are the things I'm sure in those one-score games, those close games, when he talks about sitting in the locker room and just kind of taking the temperature, that's probably one of those plays. I mean, it's the first thing he brought up when I asked him yesterday about everything. Those are the things. We talked about it on Monday in those close games where everything's kind of got to break your way or you got to make those plays. Those are the things that stick in your head for a little while.
And I do think that there is a route to. We talked about if Iowa fans, if there's anything that is going to be left as a positive after this game. I do think that, like, let's say Caleb rips off another 150 yards on Saturday. Let's say the defense pitches another shutout against a Troy team that, they've scored points this year, 17 and 21 points in their first 2 games, something like that. But if they're able to get another shutout, I think that Iowa fans will still leave this game feeling like, okay, I think that, that second half was an anomaly. Iowa State, that's going to dictate things too. Like, how good is Iowa State going to be this year? If they end up being a really good team, it's like, hey, we got beat by a better team possibly. So I think that there is an opportunity for still Iowa, if they win this game, 45-0 or something, for them to be like, all right, Iowa fans are going to be happy with what they saw.
And maybe it's only been in the last 20 years or so, but I feel like there's a decent contingent of Iowa fans that if you lose to Iowa State, typically like the second or third game of the year, you go, all right, we'll just hope for 2002. This was a team that had a great performance at quarterback in the second half, particularly the fourth quarter. We blew a double-digit lead, and hey, it's the Cy-Hawk, that's what happens. If you're wondering if Kirk Ferentz is wondering about that, he is way ahead of you.
Yeah, I can even top you on that one. Coincidentally, Brad Banks was here on Sunday in the office. He was at the game and came through, and we got to spend some time with him. We talked about that game. I always think the great thing about Brad's story and probably that team story is how he did respond. And everybody knows Brad Banks, Player of the Year and runner-up to the Heisman, and obviously played really well all season long. But what an easy path, and what you're referencing there, that third quarter especially was really rough. And I share that story a lot with our players annually, just in that the essence of what Brad did that year, in my opinion, is, I don't think anybody felt worse. Talk about investment. Nobody feels worse after a game in that case than him. But he went back to work. And Brad's pretty unflappable. That's one characteristic he really, I think embodies. And 2 weeks later, we're in the very same situation. You know, we got a big lead at Penn State, and all of a sudden that fourth quarter disappeared, and we're in overtime. And I would suggest a big part of the reason we won that game was Brad's performance in overtime. So, you know, it's just the kind of one of those stories I cover annually with the team. And, you know, that's the right idea. Like, that's what you're looking to do, and then the rest is history. Not that the whole season was smooth, but it was hard. So, you know, those are things we talk about in camp. That's part of the curriculum, if you will. And just, you know, during the season, you're going to encounter disappointments, and that's one of the more disappointing losses I've ever been involved with on a personal basis. But, you know, life goes on, and it's what you do in response that really matters.
As Kirk was talking there, and I kind of noticed this as I was cutting this for a soundbite yesterday, that he said that was one of the most disappointing losses I've ever been a part of. Initially, when I first heard it, I thought he was talking about 0-2, and maybe he was, but I feel like the way that he spoke it, I was like, was he talking about this year? I feel like it could have, the way he phrased it, it could have gone to either this year or that 0-2 team.
I'm sure it kind of does. I think he was talking specifically about 0-2, but I wouldn't be shocked if this were up there too, because not just of the similarities, but because, you know, we talked about everybody being back on this defense and all the variables of Iowa doesn't lose games when they lose by or win by 8 or more points, and when they rush the way they did, and the third down defense they had against Iowa State was terrific. And yeah, you're just kind of left wondering. I think that's maybe the overarching shell shock of it, of just like Iowa doesn't lose these games almost ever, and they did, and now you just kind of got to pick up the lunch pail and keep on going with the job. And yeah, that's a tough one. I wouldn't be shocked if this is one of his one of those losses that'll stick with him,
especially being his first game on the sidelines of the year. I mean,
sure.
he before the game came out to such a big ovation. You know, the crowd just really roared for him when he walked out on the field back, whatever it was, 30 minutes before kickoff. And I don't know, it looked like he was a little bit emotional on the sidelines before the game. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that was a game that he wanted more than a lot of Cy-Hawk games. Yeah,
the first time I heard it, I thought the same thing. I think the second and third time, I'm pretty sure he meant the 2002 one. Just in retrospect, when you look at that year, 11-1, or if you know that Iowa State game goes differently, you're 12-0, you have a shot at, you have an argument at, hey, we should be in the national title discussion. Right. Even though I don't think ultimately Iowa gets in because Ohio State and Miami were undefeated, but you know that's what I took from him.
Are you like me in the sense that if there is a loss to Iowa State, you just immediately go, hey, 0-2, like. Everything's still on the table, especially in an expanded.
0-2 is still painful to me.
Yeah, I mean it's
that was like 11.
Seneca was a video game back then.
Yeah.
It was like
they were up 24-7 at half too, so they were up a little more.
Yeah. It's you know, in this expanded playoff realm too, where there's 12 teams, one loss does not destroy your season unless you're Notre Dame, but that's an entirely different story. Just because you're not in a conference, you're 0-0 in conference. Like there's still everything to play for there. There's a 10-2 team in Power 4 conferences that are going to get into the playoff. So everything's kind of still in. It's just that in-state rivalry sting in a particularly excruciating fashion this time around.
Yeah. The only thing about that makes me worried if Iowa does end up finishing 10-2 is when you look at the top 25 and like 6 of the 7 teams are SEC. I wouldn't be surprised if like Alabama was 9-3. They'd get over a team like Iowa at 10-2, which. Yeah.
Alabama jumping another team to get into the playoff. Go on.
You know, not just Alabama, you know, Clemson. I think
we were in the car back from Indy last December when we were sitting there, and I think you guys were like,
"I was watching the
Florida
show.
State, right?" And I was like,
"They can't let them out." Can
I was like, "It's going to be Alabama, guys. It's good." I'm not basking in this, but like, we've seen this story before.
Yeah.
So we'll see if there's a bounce back. Certainly. What does success look like then coming out of a loss like this? I think we've recapped it enough at this point in the excruciatingness of it. We already said this is a win that's like, there's no fashion in which you win that people are going to be like joyous all is well. What is success though? Maybe particularly for the offense, but let's face it, the defense probably feels like they have something to show too.
I think you need at least 2 or 3 turnovers, you know, to prove that you are still back. I'd need to look up this statistic again, but last year after Castro had that pick 6 against Iowa State, somebody had posted that was like Iowa's 16th straight year with a pick 6 or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I think that them getting that first defensive score of the season would be something that would boost the spirits of what they see on the defense.
I think turnovers and touchdowns, definitely. Couple turnovers, couple touchdowns. You know, you gotta. You know, I think. I'm not saying you have to cover the spread, but that kind of. I haven't bet on it, but that kind of like point difference. You know, 25 to 30 point win.
Yeah.
Scoring over 30, 35 points. Mm-hmm. That's what you're looking for. Rushing the ball and Cade having another sharp day. Mm-hmm. If he doesn't play well and he's inaccurate against Troy, you know, a team with a lot of new faces, I'm going to be a little bit concerned.
Basically, we need, I think, what they did against Western Michigan last year, where there was like, I mean, what did they have? Three different guys score rushing touchdowns last year.
Sean Kamari. Did Caleb have one in that?
Max White?
Max White.
Max White, yeah. Max White had the last one, and I feel like that was what lifted the spirits of everybody was Max White just scored a touchdown with 30 seconds left or whatever. They're running up the score now. What's going on?
Yeah.
I feel like that's the kind of game that they would
And a
need
blocked punt.
Yeah, that's right.
Ontario Thompson, who's ironically now at Western Michigan playing there. Yeah.
So I had a thought before the roughing the punter penalty on Devin Hilson. I think Devin's going to get a blocked punt. He should have had one week 1.
Devin is going to catch one off a punter's foot at some point. He is back there and he's, you know, I think we talked about him after the spring game because he had a fumble recovery and he was in on a couple too. Like, yeah, that kid is going to be a special teams ace if he isn't already.
Yeah.
We never talked about it after Illinois State, but he had a break on the ball, on the punt where he was there so quickly that the punter like ran with the ball.
Yeah.
He's like, this is going to get blocked. I'm just going to go.
I feel like they've been so close, and I've almost been surprised that, like, I feel like each of Iowa's first 2 games, their opponent has had trouble with the snap.
They've been very low.
Yeah. A lot of low snaps, and I'm just like, if Iowa just really goes all out on one of these punt blocks, like, they're going to get there for sure. But haven't quite made it happen yet.
We'll see if they do against Troy, who is a very different team in 2024 than they were in 23 and 22. Back-to-back Sun Belt Conference champions, 11-3 last season, 12-2 2 seasons ago. But you see there, if you're watching on YouTube, the graphic, this ain't 22 at an 823. 31 incoming transfers. That's 8th most in FBS. 61 new players, 6th most among the bowl teams. They are under first-year head coach Gerard Parker, who in 2016 got his first interim head coach job and head coach opportunity because Purdue lost to Iowa. Purdue decided to fire Darrell Hazel. And so Gerard Parker stepped up 2016 where he was working alongside a certain quarterbacks coach whose name was
Tim Lester.
They know each other from their days in West Lafayette.
There's always an Iowa connection, isn't there?
There's always an Iowa connection. John Steppe actually did a really nice article in the Gazette this morning talking to Parker about those parallels and his relationship. He is very high on Tim Lester, and from what he saw working with David Blau and the Purdue Boilermaker quarterbacks back then in 2016. Troy, we talk about opportunities for this offense. 120th in the country in rush defense are the Trojans, 94th overall. Interesting, though, for this Troy offense, whose starting quarterback, it sounds like he's maybe banged up, is probable for this one. His name is Goose Crowder. Hell yeah.
Sounds like a Northeast dish.
Yeah, the Goose Crowder.
He got hurt, I don't know if you watched the game, scoring a touchdown on a QB run. So if he is in, he can run, but he's coming off a shoulder injury. I don't know if he's going to want to try and test the Iowa DBs, Iowa linebackers.
He's got a clipped wing, we say.
Program that is not new to knocking quarterbacks out of the game.
There you go. Interesting stat on Troy. They have 6 drives this year that have gone double-digit plays. 6 scoring drives, I should say, too. I think all of them have gone. They have an 11-play drive, a 10-play drive, 3 13-play drives, and a 14-play drive. Those have taken up as much as almost 5 minutes to as many as 7 minutes of game time. So you talk about an Iowa offense that is trying to get a little better at time of possession. This is an offense, albeit against Nevada and Memphis, has been able to control the ball and hold on to it for a while. For comparison, Iowa just 2 double-digit drives, or double-digit play drives so far here.
That probably has something.
But they've had some quick strikes for scores as well.
Probably has something to do with I was looking at some stats and looking at Troy up. They're top 15 in the nation on third down conversions, 56%, which is pretty good for a team that's 0-2 and got not blown out in the first game, but blown out in the second game.
Yeah, I believe in that opener against Nevada, they scored the first 2 touchdowns. They were out to a 14-0 lead, and I think one of these long scoring drives was in there as well. These have gone from 69 yards to 84 yards. That first touchdown drive was an 84-yard, 11-play drive. So this is a team that, hey, they might not be doing a ton of stuff on offense, but they're keeping the ball away, and that can, we've talked about this formula, keep Iowa's defense out there, get them tired. If things are playing out certain ways, you get into the third, fourth quarter, you got an opportunity to maybe do something special. You hope that's not the case there at Kinnick on Saturday, but a team that, again, a lot of new faces. They might not be the back-to-back defending champs on the roster. They've shown some sparks of things, especially for a team that's 0-2 and has really at least been in it to a certain extent in both of their games.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we keep talking about how Iowa should roll in this game, but it is an FBS level team. They've got a lot of new faces. You know, you wonder when these programs have a lot of transfers, it just takes a couple weeks to gel.
Yeah.
They're getting their quarterback, and they didn't have their center last week.
Yeah.
He's probable to play too. So maybe that, is a little thing to watch out on Sunday, which should be a good tailgating day, a 3 p.m. kickoff. It's always you get a few extra hours.
Iowa doesn't
Raucous
have,
crowd,
as of
hopefully.
right now, I don't think they have an 11 a.m. kick officially scheduled.
Really?
I think the assumption, and I know Jed Fish maybe let it leak at Big Ten Media Days, that Iowa-Washington, the homecoming game for the Hawkeyes, was maybe going to be a big noon kickoff
I think
game.
Northwestern's the homecoming game.
Washington's the homecoming game, October 12th.
Northwestern is homecoming,
Is it?
October 26th. Which
Really?
It lists it right now as
I have a big tailgate to go to on October 12th. I will not be partaking. I'm just going. I'm getting a breakfast sandwich, and I will work. So I've probably got that built in my head as the,
Sure.
the
Yeah.
homecoming game.
Gotcha. Yeah,
I apologize to the Wildcats for offending them.
which that is already listed as a 2:30. So I assume it can still
but
get.
you got 6:30 for Nebraska and Minnesota now. As of the last couple of days, we've learned the Minnesota kickoff. So it's just strange to have a schedule that's doesn't have an official 11 a.m. kick there anywhere.
That's true.
I think maybe the assumption is maybe Ohio State would be as well, but we'll.
And who's mad about it? Anybody that shoots Friday night football? Anybody gonna be upset about not
extra
getting an
sleep,
11
little
a.m.
extra sleep.
kickoff?
I would be
I don't know.
surprised if Wisconsin is.
Yeah,
that
sure.
seems like an 11 a.m.
That
kick just
Minnesota
traditionally.
6:30 kick on the road is
That's a beauty.
for some of us.
Make it 8 o'clock. See if I care. Yeah.
It's a late drive home.
See if I care.
Yeah, clearly.
I'm a night driver. Wisconsin was a night game last year, I think, on the road in Madison. I feel like that
It was 2:30. My friend had a wedding.
was it? Okay.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
Shout out
Watched
to
it
Ben.
third quarter while they were giving their vows on my phone.
Really?
Washington's an ANF Black and Gold Spirit game, which
boy.
that kind of feels like homecoming, right?
Yeah, it does. Let me ask you this about this game this week. Who do you think is going to be the leading rusher? Do you think they ride Caleb, or do you think they give him a little break?
I feel like LaShawn. I know you asked about if he was still coming back from the injury, and it sounds like he's good to go. I just feel like wouldn't that make total sense? Caleb's the fourth leading rusher in the country, has an opportunity to go up against a defense that is not very good against the run, and it'll be somebody else. Caleb will probably still have
5 to 10 carries, probably, maybe more.
than that, maybe. But LaShawn against Western Michigan last year, that was his big breakout game, and I think he had 150 total offensive yards, something like that. And wouldn't be shocked to see somebody else maybe be the leading rusher. And again, this Iowa defensive or offensive line has been playing great, so you do feel like maybe there's an opportunity for whether it's Kamari or LaShawn. Jazz is still in the mix, and some other guys maybe have an opportunity as well.
With how bad you said that their run defense is, boy, that's something that does bode well for the Iowa backfield. And I could see, I hope they keep riding Caleb just to, get him 100 yards, keep his stat line going. And, I could see him maybe getting pulled at halftime or so just to keep him healthy. But this is the type of game where you could see at least a couple of guys going for 100 yards.
I know it's early, but my sophomore year in college in 2009, when Sean Green ran for 100 yards every game he played in.
Yeah.
2008, my bad. That was my freshman year. Anyway, it was a buzz, among fans and students, is Sean going to run for 100 yards? That was the storyline after they lost a few games early.
It's wild to think. I don't think people in 2024 college football as well, ball's getting thrown more than it has at any other point, or it feels like it at least. And so many backfields have 3-4 guys that they lean on, that the idea of one player having 100 yards every single game is just and it was fascinating to watch as a student at Iowa at the same time too. I remember getting through the non-con schedule, which was 4 games at that point, and going into Big Ten, and you're like, boy, he's on this crazy pace, and hey, he's got a shot at setting the single season rushing record. I mean, you have 8 more games and a bowl game to play, but you're just like he's on a weird pace, a really, really great pace. And then he has the Wisconsin game and the Purdue game and every other game in between. And what Caleb is doing now just kind of, I mean, we're 2 games in, just those flashes again of just like, man, nobody can stop this kid right now.
That wasn't the year that Iowa, when was it? When did Iowa win that award for like the best offensive line?
That was 2015.
Yeah, when they went 12-0.
Oh, okay. The Joe.
But that 08 team, that was Rob Bruggeman on that offensive line. Raphael Eubanks was probably in there. Blanking on some other names, unfortunately. There's some big names on there. Why am I?
I think was Balaga on there, or was that a year later?
Balaga might have been a young guy on that line.
That's something I just keep thinking about is this offensive line, just because in the offseason, George Barnett was a little bit of a hot seat discussion. Like, are we going to bring back the O-line coach or start going in a different direction? And so George seems like a really nice guy, and I'd like to see him, keep that job, keep grinding it out with the Iowa offensive linemen. And so this could be a year that if the trend holds what we've seen the first couple of games, this could be a special year for the offensive line.
Just keep stalling for me while I will look up the 2008 Iowa football offensive line. Andy Kempel, Josh Keppel was on that one. Seth Olson, Seth Olson was on that line. Dan Dorian was a junior out of Barrington, Illinois. Riley Reif was a freshman defensive end on that. Balaga was a sophomore on that team. That was Julian Vandervelde, Travis Mead, Kyle Calloway was on that offensive line as well. So there were dudes for sure on that line. Marcus Zusevics, James Ferentz was a freshman on that team. Wow. Raphael Eubanks was a junior. So that was a darn good offensive line.
I had a class with James Ferentz.
Yeah, did you?
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, we were Tyler Barnes was in like maybe all of my health and sports studies classes.
Yeah. It was alcohol in your college experience. Just a 1-hour class.
You've shared this story before. And I have no follow-ups.
Yeah. I believe there was a basketball player in there too. But it was just one to get you to 12 hours, essentially. That Penn State game that year, if you remember,
I was freelancing.
Were you wearing green?
No, because I was freelancing. I was freelancing for ESPN, but they had a green out for
that was wearing green. Yeah.
Yeah. I still have the shirt. The green, yellow. Yeah, I still got the shirt, I believe. I was holding the cable for the Red Hat commercial guy for ESPN, and there's a great shot. David Scrivener, I believe, took this for the Iowa City Press-Citizen, right on the line of scrimmage when Daniel Murray hits that field goal. And you can see me there in these baggy jeans from Buckle, standing next to Phil Hattie, and we're just right on the line of scrimmage. And it's a great picture from David, who's one of the best photographers in the area. But I always think that wasn't the coldest game in Kinnick Stadium history. That's as cold as I've ever been at a game, though.
I didn't bring a winter coat, so that's why I was cold.
It was cold, it was windy, and I was not dressed appropriately. There were not enough layers there. Like even Minnesota, Iowa 2 years ago when it was -1 wind chill at kickoff in Minneapolis. I was warmer just because I was dressed better. That 08, 22-year-old Mitch working the sidelines for ESPN did not layer up properly.
No clue.
And so those are my memories of the Penn State win. We'll move ahead now to our picks. We don't need to talk about how we did last week because who cares? The past is the past. We move forward, 24-hour rule. We'll just move on. Here we go. That's more from me than anybody else. We'll move on to our picks for this week. There's some good games around the Big Ten, and we'll get into them here. Wisconsin at home, 16.5-point dogs to the Crimson Tide of Alabama. That is a Fox 28 game. That's your big noon kickoff game there, 11 a.m. from Madison. Do we think the Badgers, the Zach Hanleys,
the fighting Zach Hanleys,
can keep this within 2 scores against the Crimson Tide?
Wisconsin has been a question mark over their first 2 games. They struggled against Western Michigan, won by 14. They beat an FCS school, South Dakota, just 27-13. Something about it, though, still feels like this is a game they could put Alabama in a tough spot at some point. So I do like Wisconsin to keep it a little bit closer than 16.5.
Alrighty. You know what? This one, again, I don't have total faith in Wisconsin. But Alabama, they blew out South Florida, and what I've heard is not particularly a great South Florida team. It was 13-14 heading into the fourth quarter. They scored 28 points in the last quarter. Yeah. I think this is not your older brother's Alabama. I didn't want to say dead because it was just last year when they were in the playoff.
They're still very good, Mike.
I think they win by 10. It's an easy, comfortable win, but I just don't think they cover that spread.
I was expecting maybe a little more, and I haven't watched a ton of Wisconsin football this year from Tyler Van Dyke, transfer out of Miami. I thought this would be with him and Luke Fickell's offense that we kind of watched get its legs last year. I thought there'd be a little more explosiveness. He's thrown for just over 400 yards, 1 touchdown, no picks. I think Alabama covers. I know it's not easy to go into Camp Randall and win a game decisively, but I'm going to give Kalen DeBoer and the boys a little benefit of the doubt and say the Crimson Tide go into Madison and jump around, so to speak, on the Badgers and cover that spread.
You know, kind of, I don't want to say not fair, but kind of like a bad draw for Wisconsin to get this game at 11 a.m. because a night game in Camp Randall is a lot more difficult than a 11 a.m. kick.
Absolutely. Central Michigan, Joey Labus and the Chippewas roll into Champaign. The Illini coming off that big win against Kansas Saturday night. The Illini are 19.5-point favorites at home against CMU. Will they fire up at 11 a.m. on Peacock, or do the Illini keep a really impressive run going?
Boy, what a line that Joe Labus has so far this season. 493 yards, 5 touchdowns, 5 interceptions.
And all 5 coming against Florida Atlantic last week.
Yes, all 5 came last week.
International at Pitt Bowl Stadium.
Was it international? Excuse me.
I only know that because it was at Pitt Bowl Stadium.
Yeah, that's
Illinois coming off a nice win against Kansas, a ranked Kansas team. I think that Illinois could run it up on CMU.
You know, I think there's a chance there's a letdown game for Illinois.
Yeah.
They're going to Nebraska next week, which will be maybe it's a ranked game if a few ranked teams lose. Again, for Illinois to sneak up in that top 25. Central Michigan, don't have a lot of faith in them. Lost to FIU, I think they're going to lose and lose big against Illinois.
Yeah, I wonder if those need to be Illinois minus 19.5 just for purposes.
Of course.
Boy, it's tough because you've seen 2 sides of Central Michigan, right? Granted, Central Michigan, was it Central Connecticut State? Joey opened up with what was it, 350 through the air and 4 touchdowns, something like that. Yeah, we're getting into the nitty gritty of the MAC non-con, and boy, nobody loves MACtion in Eastern Iowa more than this guy right here. But I think the Illini will cover as well. Maybe Central Michigan will get pass happy again, and some of those interceptions will turn into completions for Joey. But yeah, Illinois, that's a Kansas team that again is going to compete for the Big 12 title, and that's going to be tough. So I think maybe we're learning a little something about the Case and Frericks boys over there in Champaign. To Washington now, that team that Iowa is going to play on October 12th, and it's not homecoming for the Hawkeyes, despite what you may have heard from certain podcast hosts. They are at home 4.5-point underdogs, the national runners-up, to Washington State. This is the Apple Cup?
No, they're favorites.
Are they favorites?
Yeah, it's a plus.
Okay, it's in here. It says Washington's plus 4.5. Sorry, I wasn't looking at the right. I don't know what to believe, Mike. Their numbers are all over the place.
I thought
I'm looking at the email.
Oh, I see.
Email of the rundown says Washington's a 4.5-point dog, which shocked me. No disrespect to the Cougars.
Still a little bit of a surprising line for just 4.5 between
both teams 2-0 rolling in. This is the Apple Cup, right? I'm right about that. Yeah.
Usually at the end of the year.
Yeah, I think that's what caught me off guard. I'm like, this is week 3
not a week 3 game. I mean, Washington State has run it up a lot more in the first 2 weeks. Washington, they beat FCS team in Weber State. They beat a MAC team in Eastern Michigan 30-9. I am maybe this is a year that Washington State, makes a little bit of a statement like, hey, you guys didn't want us in a conference, like we'll show you what we've got. Give me Washington State to beat the spread on this one.
I'm going to go with the Cougars too. I don't think Texas Tech has really shown much, so I don't know how much that win carries in weight. But rivalry game, usually throw out the records anyway. I'm going to take the 4.5 points.
I'll take Washington to cover. It's at home. Will Rogers has looked good, even though Mateer has also looked really, really good for Washington State, leading them in passing and rushing. But I'll stick with the defending champs. There's still guys that have championship or runners-up, I should say. There's still some championship game pedigree in there. So I'll stick with the Huskies to cover at home in the Apple Cup. UNI, the Fighting Owen Seabrings. It's fun to just take a name of somebody who went to a school and just make them the mascot. It's a fun game to play at home. 27.5-point underdogs the Panthers are. Mark Riley and company rolling into Memorial Stadium in Lincoln. Number 23, Nebraska. 6:30 kick on BTN. Can Farley and friends keep this thing close against the Nebraska team coming off the win against Colorado? Say what you will about Colorado. Can you and I keep it interesting?
I'll go first since no one can accuse me of stealing Owen's picks. I've heard you talk off air. I don't think you're too confident in this UNI team. I think Raiola and the Cornhuskers will roll again. Even though it's sandwiched in between two kind of way more important games, I just don't think UNI is on that upper level of the Missouri Valley this year.
The Fightin' Owen Seabrings have startlingly little faith in the Panthers to keep this game even competitive. UNI is a shell of what it once was as a program. I have been on record as saying that there is a new head coach that needs to take over this team if they want to be competitive in the FCS again. They're a team that, on their best year can make the playoffs and maybe win a game, but can't get any deeper than that. And Nebraska, I would have loved to see UNI against Nebraska 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 2 years ago even, and this game might have been a different story, but for what Nebraska is this year, I think that they're going to win this game by 35, 42 points.
Northern Iowa runs the football really, really well. I'm going to take Northern Iowa.
Oh, man.
I'm not saying they're going to win. I'm saying this.
Fighting Mitch Fix.
This team's shown us. I went there for 2 years.
He went there for 2 years.
I knocked out some gen heads there. I know people are, including the person to my left, talking about going to St. Thomas and getting a close win. I don't care if St. Thomas was a D3 a few years ago. That's a really good program. And all you did was just give them scholarships, and that gives them more power. And I think that's a good win for UNI, and I think UNI can be we don't know a ton about Nebraska yet, do we? Do we?
They've exceeded my expectations so far.
Good.
But I think you're right, and I think Raiola needs to be tested more by, Illinois I think will tell us more than this game. So
if Colorado was even a close game against Nebraska, I'd be like, okay, we don't quite know Nebraska yet, but I think they've exceeded my expectations too. And UNI kind of a fun little road swing for the Panthers. They start the 3-game split in Minnesota, and then they go at Nebraska, and then they're going to be in Hawaii next weekend.
Oh wow! I think it all depends on what kind of Nebraska team shows up. If they think they can just cruise through this game, they will have to actually go out there and perform. But I don't think it'll be that much of an issue.
If they win,
if it's close though, I'll be intrigued and throw it on the tube.
I very much wanted UNI to beat Iowa because that hasn't happened since 1899, something like that was the last time UNI beat Iowa in football. And so for the first ever meeting against Nebraska, if UNI pulls it off, that would maybe be my favorite UNI win of any sport in school history. But my faith is shockingly low.
Not shockingly, you've really established the lack of faith. Yeah, we now turn to Iowa's game. They are 22.5-point favorites against Troy. That is a 3 p.m. kick on FS1 Saturday at Kinnick Stadium. It'll be Iowa's third straight home game to open the year. They have yet to play on the road. They will, of course, next week against Minnesota. What do we think about Iowa in a game where there's no perfect way for them to win without getting somebody saying something about, it's only Troy or whatever? What do we think about Iowa on Saturday?
I might be more inclined to take Troy just with the points because Iowa, the offense, they like to control the ball, they like to run the ball. If Iowa would have won last week, I think the fact that they lost, you saw how much the players cared. I think they're going to want to come out and put a show and just perform as best as they can because, just coming off that loss, I think a lot of players are going to be amped up for this one, more so than they would be if they just cruised against Iowa State last week. So I think they're going to cover. It's going to be like 34-3 kind of game. So
yeah, that's about what I was getting to. I think that Iowa could score in the mid-30s, and I think that they will not have any problem beating that. I feel like they're so motivated just to get the bad taste out of their mouth from that Iowa State game that is going to. I think it could be a pretty deep win.
Yeah, I think it could be a shutout. Again, They just have so much success on the ground going up against a team that is not good on the ground, and I think this defense, more so for the defense than the offense, really, which is a kind of a strange thing to say, but I think this offense or this defense wants to prove a lot that the second half Saturday was just an aberration, and that this defense is dominant and is shoring up everything and will not let the mistakes of the second half Saturday happen again. So I think they could get their second shutout in 3 games. And again, it's a win that nobody's going to be happy about in the fan base. However, they get it. They'll, I think, don't complain about being 2-1, but just do your jobs, as a coach down on 42nd Street says all the time. I think that's all you can ask for Iowa. Don't worry about reaction to how you win or the manner in which you win. Just do it, get it done, and turn your eyes north and get ready for conference play. Anything else before we wrap up today?
I don't have anything.
Yeah, I think.
It's one of those shows that I think that, like, when I was putting together the rundown, I was like, man, what are the storylines?
Exactly. And I was struggling with that even as we were finishing up interviews yesterday. I'm like, there's not a lot to talk about this week. I feel like everybody, even the players, like, even if they wouldn't ever say it, obviously, it's like they're on to Minnesota.
I do have one thing, because as a topic, I think we beat it like a dead horse every week, but it is kind of one of the most important things on the football team is the quarterback position. Asked a few times, Kirk was, if he saw his confidence in Cade. We saw just not a great 3 quarters at the end of the game. He says he did. He was asked if he would share the snaps with, like they did in 2001 with Kyle McCain and Brad Banks. Doesn't seem like that's going to happen. But Cade didn't come out to media yesterday. Do you guys make anything of that?
No.
I
Maybe this is because my primary job is news now. This is not an elected official like ducking a catastrophe in a presser after that. It's a 23-year-old, 24-year-old kid, I don't know when his birthday is, having a class conflict. And all due respect to our colleagues in the media, but like, why are you mad?
This
isn't truth to power.
Conflict the first 2 weeks. He came to media.
Well, we had like special, like, I think he made exceptions to like show up in like a very small window, like, and we adjusted last year when he had a class conflict and he would come to the podium rather than the 11 a.m. stuff. Like, you heard from him Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the only person that we heard from both Saturday and Tuesday was Caleb, correct? Caleb Johnson.
I believe that's right, yeah.
Saturday,
talked to Jennings and said.
Do you feel less bad, Cade?
Yeah.
No, I get that, but he's a public figure on the campus, and it is one of the biggest storylines, Yeah. So that's the only reason I bring it up, and I'm, as personally, I don't care that much, but I know Spencer came out every week, and those are the parallels that some people drew.
People said, Spencer and Deacon came out every week. Like,
yeah.
I don't know their class schedules.
I only laughed because this became such a thing during media availability yesterday that I'm like...
Oh, did it? I wasn't there, just full disclosure.
I get it, because it was... I think what happened was that some people just went and posted, like, Cade is not available to the media today. And never, like, I don't know if they asked or didn't ask, like, any of the SIDs, like, hey, is Cade going to be here? And got a rationale for it. Because then that turned into responses of, like, he has a class conflict. He'll be here next week.
Yeah. I guess it is not the end of the world if I don't hear from the quarterback every week. Like, we did hear from Cade, I think, last year every week until he got injured. But this year, like, if he's got class conflict, like, I don't know, we've got other players to talk to. So
people met Hayden Large for the first time yesterday. People got to, and you got to. A great shot of him basically introducing himself to everybody he didn't know.
Yeah.
So you get those things.
Yep. He went around and shook the hands of everybody, either before or afterwards. Like, oh, hey, I'm Hayden, by the way. Nice to meet you. Yeah, he's a nice kid. So, yeah, I don't make a lot of it just because, it's kind of the same as the last 3 or 4 years where it's like we're asking the quarterback the same exact questions, it seems like, every week after they struggle. So, like, do you want to hear from Cade this week? Like, what light is he going to shed on something that you don't already know that he is? Like, we can make up his sound bites. We know what he's going to say. So I put zero stock in that. I don't really care if I don't get to talk to Cade, and I don't think that there's a whole lot to read into it.
Like talking to him. It's, good to ask him questions and get
sure.
got to learn about his grandma last week. That was great.
I always like hearing from him. He's a good kid.
I only asked too because I don't go to the media interviews, full disclosure for the people out there listening. But every week when I listen to you guys' sound bites, he's the one that I'm like, okay, I might actually get something from him. Whereas I listen to
quarterback, right?
Yeah, he's a quarterback. It's interesting, and he does say stuff interesting, like that grandma tidbit, and we use some of his sound bites for the Cyhawk game, and he's an interesting interview, and I like listening to him. And sometimes when I listen to some of the players, I'm just like, oh yeah, you got some good media training. Just they seem like they're more Stonewall than him, even though he's the quarterback, and usually quarterbacks are usually more buttoned up.
Yeah.
So
yeah. He's been through the media training the right way, kind of like Kate Martin almost, where it's like they say all the right things, but it still is in an interesting fashion. They're still telling interesting stories, and they're still open with us. They're sharing a lot of things.
Personable.
Without like revealing too much about the team or anything that they shouldn't share.
Hayden Large was a great interview.
Yeah,
I'm
got a
really
chance.
happy that the story that we discussed with him last year and what he went through as a high schooler and missing his whole senior year from injury, like a lot of media members got to learn that story for the first time yesterday, which I thought was really, really cool. For those of you that don't know that, he missed his whole senior year, basically ripped his hamstring so hard he tore part of his pelvic bone with it, was bedridden for a while, which serendipitously sends him to Dort, which means LeVar Woods somehow sees him and offers him, and he told me that he thanks LeVar before every game for thanks for having zero reason to watch a Dort football game, but come and find me and offer me this opportunity. So it's really cool.
Mitch and I have been big on Hayden Large since he came to campus, just because Mitch used to work in a market where he played high school football. I used to work in a market where he played college football. I did a lot of Dort coverage. He did a lot of Unity Christian coverage. And so even though neither of us met this guy when he would have been playing at those levels, we're just like, oh, Dort's coming to Iowa? All right, we love it.
And he's just a nice kid.
Yeah.
He's a really wonderful kid.
Fits the fullback mold, just a funny guy, very personable. He's just an easy guy to root for.
I'll end today on this note as we talk about Saturday. If you watched Iowa's News Now last week, we did a story. Cedric Bolton III did the story. Saturday is going to be a really special day. It's Be Bold, Wear Gold. Fans are supposed to wear gold. Gold is also the color for pediatric cancer awareness. Saturday is Project Hello from the Other Side. There are, at last count, 70-plus families represented by 450-some people who have had patients at UI Stead Family Children's Hospital that have been waved to in the past. They're going to be in the stands at Kinnick on Saturday. They get to wave to the hospital, a lot of them for the first time. And as we dissect with fine-tooth combs and tweezers every nuance of how an offense is or is not working, or what happened with the defense, or all these little minute details of these games that we don't take any sort of part in. If you're at the game or you're watching on TV Saturday, think of these 400-some folks, some of them kids who have been fighting for their lives and going through some hell in that hospital at some point, and think of the awesome situation they get on Saturday where they get to wave at the hospital after being there and receiving the wave. How's that for paying it forward? Really cool thing. If you're watching on YouTube, Mike's got the iowasnewsnow.com story up there. Cedric did a great job with it, and
I'll share it on our Twitter account too.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. That's
and Cedric's going to be in the building on Saturday. He's coming out. He's going to do some interviews in the stands from that point.
Awesome. That's what it's about, folks. That's what it's about. And it's always such a chaotic time, the wave for us as guys who are on the field, because we're trying to get to the other side of the field, keep following the play, the flow of play and where that's going. And so I'm usually walking behind the benches, like waving and looking where I'm going in this like weird little corridor of benches and wall. And that's every single time. And the ovation for the kid captain is always big.
I put together a little string of sound bites last year, but
awesome,
it's really amazing to me how well Kirk Ferentz knows the stories of these kids. You know, it'd be one thing if he went out there and just like kind of was reading off people. Maya is from Clarksville, Iowa, but he knows these stories from his heart. I mean, he seems to go up there and he tells us about these kids, tells us their interests. I mean, I don't know how well Kirk knows the medical field, but he knows their diagnoses, what ages they happen, and what kind of things they struggle with physically. And it's really amazing to me every week how much he knows about these kids every time he comes out there and gives the rundown of the kid captain.
I would encourage people to Google Savvy Ferentz and learn her story and why Kirk cares the way he does. Just remember, folks, the toughest battle in Iowa City and near Kinnick Stadium every Saturday is far from that football field. So on that note, we will be back here Monday to recap that Troy game, maybe look a little bit ahead to the battle for the Floyd of Rosedale, but it's going to be a great day at Kinnick. 80 again. Thought we were in fall. We're not in fall yet, so we'll short sleeves, I suppose.
And shorts.
We'll dress accordingly there. For Mike and Owen, I'm Mitch. Thanks as always for supporting On the Hawks. We'll see you Monday to recap that game against Troy.